Hi there guys, and welcome to a new video. My name's Ross, and recently I moved to Australia with my family in order to start a new life. Our channel is all about emigrating to Australia, showing you the Aussie lifestyle with the aim of inspiring and helping you to make the move yourself. Now, I'm not an organised person, and anything I do in life, my wife always moans because I just kind of wing it. And when we moved to Australia, apart from going into quarantine for 2 weeks, we didn't really know what we'd need to do in the first instance. So since moving, I thought I'd share with you 5 things that you need to do when you move to Australia so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Hopefully this video will help you to set up a little bit quicker and make everything a bit smoother in what could otherwise be one of the most stressful times of your life. This video is sponsored by True Blue Migration. True Blue Migration is one of Australia's oldest and largest migration agencies. They manage hundreds of successful visa applications, appeals, and citizenship applications every year. When we moved to Australia, we used a migration agent. And to be honest, you don't need all of the stress and hassle involved in managing your own application. There are loads of forms that you need to fill in, loads of checks that you need to do, and what happens if you do it all wrong? True Blue Migration have a team of MARA registered agents across 5 different nationalities, including the UK and Ireland. They have collectively over 60 years worth of experience in managing every type of visa that you can think of. If you have a tricky situation or you want the whole process to go quickly and as smoothly as possible, then I'd recommend using True Blue Migration. The best bit about True Blue Migration is they're now offering free assessments. And if you can save any money while doing this process, then it's going to be good, especially at the start. So go ahead and contact them and let them tell you exactly what options that you have for moving to Australia. There's no obligation to go with them. The service is completely free. Most agents actually charge between $100 and $300 just for this bit. And if you do decide to go with them, they also offer split payment options so that you can help to manage the cost. And one last thing, if you do decide to go with them, remember to tell them who sent you, and I'll put full details down in the description below. And now onto the video. So the first thing that I think you need to do when you move to Australia is get a phone number. Although we used our UK number when we first got here, and we had a plan that allowed us to make some international calls like we were on holiday. When you're signing up for things like you need to do when you move to a new country, sometimes they want you to have an Australian number and won't let you put in your UK one or from wherever else that you've come from. Getting a new number is pretty easy, although actually that was made even more difficult for us because we had to go into quarantine and we couldn't even pick up a SIM card at the airport when we arrived. Most of the big companies now will send you a SIM card, so you just tell them wherever it is that you're quarantining, or if you see this video when they don't have quarantine anymore, then just pick a SIM card up straight away. Prepaid SIM cards seem to be pretty popular here right now, especially if you've already got a phone that you don't mind just popping a new SIM card into, and you can get some pretty decent plans for about $20 to $30. Aldi seems to be a pretty good one. They use the Telstra network, and that gives you about 20 gigabytes, unlimited calls for about $30. Telstra's the one that we went for. They're the biggest network in Australia, and for about $30 you can get 25 gigabytes worth of data, unlimited calls. They even let you do some calls back to the UK, so if you need to speak to family and you don't want to do it on FaceTime. And most importantly, if you're in hotel quarantine, they'll send you the SIM card. It takes a few days to arrive, but to be honest, if you're in quarantine, you just sleep for the first few days anyway because you're getting over jet lag. If you're going to make the move, make sure you've got a half decent phone that you can put it into. And let's be honest, with all the other costs of moving anyway, you don't want to be forking out extra money on an unnecessary phone. Next thing, you're going to need to open a bank account. Now, some of the big banks in Australia will allow you to set up your bank account from abroad. These include ANZ, Westpac, and NAB. Before you sign up with them, check that you're picking an account that doesn't have any extra fees or add-ons that you don't want to pay for. And if you're doing it particularly in advance, some might have fees where they have a minimum amount that you need to start depositing every month. So just make sure you read the terms and conditions and check what it is that you're signing up for. Now, this isn't a perfect solution, and I still would recommend trying to carry cash on you for the first few weeks anyway. Coming into Australia, you're allowed to take up to $10,000 before you have to declare how much money you've got. But to be honest, who the hell's going to be so flush that they can walk around with $10,000 on them anyway? Not many people are that fortunate. But the reason for this is that when you arrive in Australia, let your bank know, and then they'll get your card ready so that you can go into the bank, show your documentation, and then collect it. This can take up to 10 business days, and also, like us, you might run into some other problems if you haven't yet managed to sort out some accommodation. Initially, we went with ANZ. We told them when we arrived that we needed our bank cards. but when we showed up at the bank, they said because we didn't have any proof of address, that they weren't going to give us the cards. This then meant that we didn't have a card for about another 2 weeks while we sorted out accommodation and could go down again and show them our rental agreement. In that time, I went with Westpac as well, and I was able to set up some online payments while I was also waiting for the card from them. To be honest, in the first few weeks, our credit cards and debit cards from the UK did take a bit of a hit with foreign exchange fees, because we did have to use them, but it seems like there's no real way of getting a card straight away as soon as you land. So apart from opening a bank account, make sure you've got some cash too. The third thing I'd recommend doing is getting a tax file number from the ATO. This is one of the easiest things that you can do. It can all be done online and takes between 5 and 10 minutes. You need one of these per person. This is a bit like your national insurance number or a social security number, so every person needs to have their own individual number. This is most important because you need to give this to your employer when you start work, although you can start work without a tax file number. If you don't have one and give it to your employer within 28 days, then they're going to start to withhold about 50% in tax. And considering how easy it is to do, why would you not do it straight away? Especially if you're in quarantine for 2 weeks. Like, there's nothing else to do apart from watching TV or Wiggles on repeat if you're there with a small child like I was. Speaking of 2 weeks in quarantine, that gives you perfect time for tip number 4, and that's finding some rental accommodation. Now there are 2 ways you can do this depending on how short or long term you need it to be. From a short term perspective, we went with an Airbnb for our first week or so while we were in Australia. Go onto the Airbnb website, look it up, there's loads of options. You might pay a little bit more for it, but it's quick, easy, and you can get something definite straight away. For finding something a little bit more long term, have a look on realestate.com.au. Most rentals are between 6 to 12 months, and if renting at the moment is anything like it is in Queensland, well, those things go really, really quickly. So you need to be a bit agile when going to viewings and appointments, and as long as the place isn't dire, I'd recommend just signing up for whatever you think you can afford and then picking the best one from whoever says it's still available. In the first few days after leaving quarantine, we ended up looking at around about 7 or 8 properties. We applied for 6 of them and we heard back from 2. So it is a numbers game. Don't have your heart set on a particular one. It's so competitive at the moment that you kind of just get what you're given. When going to the appointments, make sure you dress up a little bit. It's not an interview, but most of the time the landlords or the managers are giving you the tour, so they're going to look at what you look like and base who they're going to rent the property on that. And make sure you've got some referees available to put down on the application. If you know anyone that's in Australia that can act as a referee for you, that could be even better. Spend your time beforehand pre-researching some areas that you'd want to live in. And also, if you do have a job available, make sure you pick an area that's suitable for getting to and from your job. If you've got a job lined up straight away as well, you can even ask your boss to see if he'll act as a reference for you. If you want to know about our first rental property and what that process was like in a little bit more detail, the link should be popping up there in a second. And the last thing that you need to get sorted out is your Medicare number. Now in Australia, most countries, including the UK, will have some kind of reciprocal Medicare agreement, so don't worry, you don't need it straight away if there is an emergency, but I recommend getting it sorted out as soon as possible because you can actually use your Medicare number as a form of ID, particularly when applying for properties or applying for anything else that might need some kind of official documentation. For this, you can either go along to Centrelink or you can actually do it on MyGov, which is an online government website. Once you've filled in the forms and completed your application, you then get a digital form of the card on an app on your phone. This is then really handy if you can take it across to get your driver license, because you can then use it as a form of ID for that application as well. I'd recommend doing the Medicare thing first because you don't need a driver license to get your Medicare card. This is also really important if you do need any kind of doctor, because they're going to ask you for your Medicare card first, and then as long as you go to a bulk billing doctor, most treatments are going to be free. If you've got any prescription medications that you need to get straight away, you're going to need a Medicare card. So those are my 5 main tips on what you need to do when you first move to Australia, but here are some other things that you will also need to consider doing pretty soon after anyway. To get around, you're going to need some kind of transport. Now public transport in Australia seems to be pretty good, but depending on which state you're in, you're going to need a different card for it. They haven't yet quite got wise to the fact that you can just use your normal debit card to tap on things. In Brisbane, these are called Go cards. In Sydney, I think they're called Opal cards, and in Melbourne are like Mikey or something. Never been, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. These need to be preloaded with some money, and then you just tap them on and off when you go on public transport. Normally you can buy these from newsagents, and they're pretty easy to get hold of. If you're not using public transport and you need to buy a car, well, I've already made a video about that process of buying a car in Australia, and the link should pop up to that in a second. Whilst if you come from the UK, you can use your UK license for the first few months. You're going to want to need to get that transferred over. And again, I've got a video to that process, which should be coming up there now. If you don't have a job yet and you're trying to look for a job when you first land in Australia, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. That seems to be a pretty well used social media tool for jobs. And you can also sign up for a free premium service just so that you can check out who is actually looking at your profile. And then just cancel it when they want to pay you money, because who needs to pay for that? Other websites that I looked at for jobs were Seek and Indeed. To be honest, I preferred Seek. You can do this before you go. You can set up alerts that go straight to your phone, and they'll tell you when any new jobs pop up that are kind of within the parameters that you want. And lastly, if you've got kids like me, you're going to want to update their vaccination records. In Australia, you do get childcare subsidy, and it's really helpful at paying for childcare. Our childcare costs around $30 per day, but if we didn't have childcare subsidy, that would cost well over $100 per day. Now, considering we don't have any family over here, we really need that in order to be able to go to work. But Australia, if you can't prove that your children are vaccinated appropriately, then you're not entitled to childcare subsidy. For this one, although I think you can do it online, I definitely would recommend going to Centrelink. They'll be able to sit you down, talk you through the whole process, and then you can provide all of the documentation like your red book to prove exactly what vaccinations your child has had. And then if they need any additional ones, then you can get them booked in at the doctor. The process didn't actually cost us anything, but it did take a lot of time toing and froing from Centrelink and to doctors in order to get all of the vaccinations proved for Aurora. I didn't want to make this video 6 things that you need to do before moving to Australia, because I know that some people that are watching this probably don't have kids. If you've moved to Australia and you have any more tips or help that you think might help people when making the move, make sure you leave a comment down below with some ideas that you might have. If you found this video useful, make sure to give us a like, or if you want to have a look at any of our other content about moving to Australia or any other tips and tricks about making the move, then have a look at our channel and make sure to subscribe if that's something that you're into. But until the next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.